if you will say your name and uh, where in the St. Louis metro area you lived during the 1960s.
My name is Roy Cheater, and in the 60s, I lived in Baldwin, Missouri.
I am Norma Cheater, and in the 60s, I lived in unincorporated St. Louis County. At that time, it was called Chesterfield.
Uh, how old were you and what grade in school were you at the beginning of the decade?
Beginning of the decade, I was 5 and not in school yet.
In the 1960s,
Yeah, 1960.
I said just 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
No, born in 48.
And 12? I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
you're 7
Yeah,
years older
that's
than
right.
I am.
Senior moment.
okay, so then you were in, is that 8th grade? 12? 7th grade?
7.
Okay. So junior high school, probably.
Yes.
Okay. So you were in school, Dad, before Brown versus Board ruled segregation illegal.
Right.
So how do you remember classes becoming integrated?
Back when I was in junior high school, but it wasn't an issue out here in the county area. The black students and white students all were together. There was no division in it.
So from my research, the St. Louis public schools, and I'm assuming what would have been Rockwood at that point, um, they claimed that they were um, integrating around 1955. So that was so at 60 in 7th grade that you were integrated.
Yes, I think there was black students there. Yes, I understand that some of the black in the lower grades, like maybe from first to sixth grade, went to a predominantly black school, and then after that point, I think they just went on to with the junior high school. But there was everybody accepted it. There was no, as far as I knew, I didn't know of any issues.
Was there a demographic change in your classes that you remember?
Not that I remember.
So it was pretty consistent.
Yeah,
And then you, Mom, went to school after Brown versus Board.
Right. I didn't start school until 61.
So what was school like for you? Because you were in a more rural part of St. Louis than Dad
Yes.
was.
Until 3rd grade, we didn't really have any black students. First and second grade, we had a lot of Mexican students because they worked in Hellwig's Gardens. And Mr. Hellwig would go get them, bring them up, pay them, house them, and then he took them back when the season was over. And then he'd start over the next year. So I had more exposure to Mexican than I ever did black in grade school.
When did that demographic change?
3rd grade.
It became more black, less Mexican, or
The laws changed and they really weren't allowed to bring them up and take them. I mean,
the immigration laws changed.
the immigration laws changed. And then in 3rd grade, there was a school for black kids that was over close to their neighborhood. It was actually at the end of their road, and they decided that they wanted to mainstream more into the other schools that were in the same district. We were all in the same district, but they wanted their kids to be with more white kids. So it was 3rd grade, which was 63. Yeah, 61, 62. Yeah, 63, because that was the same year Kennedy got killed.
So they had a segregated school in essence. They had a school for black kids that they went to
Yeah.
in the neighborhood where
It was
they
their neighborhood school.
got
And it wasn't just because it was black kids, it
Mhm.
was their neighborhood school.
hmm do you guys remember grandmas and grandpas having a problem with the integration process?
Yes. They were not in favor of it,
Both of them?
both of them.
I would agree.
Yeah.
My parents were not in favor of either.
Did their opinions come out at home in terms of what happened at school? Not just their opinions on what was happening in the country at that time, but their displeasure with school, was that vocalized at home?
Not where I could hear it, or I never paid any attention to it.
I agree the same thing. I don't think my parents really talked about it. If they did, it wasn't within my earshot. So, I mean,
Dad, you played sports in high school. Did you
Yeah.
play sports in junior high too?
No.
Not just high school. How did integration affect the teams at that point?
no, I did football, tried out for basketball, did track and field, and the students, black and white, got along. We were a team. And for being at that time, our high school was small. It really was.
How many kids were in your
Uh,
class?
I think our graduating class was maybe 300, maybe 300 kids in the graduating class. And then after we graduated, the school started expanding and more buildings and everything else. But no, that it wasn't.
Did you have a job? When did you get your first job?
My first job would have been probably 67, somewhere up, or 68.
Out of high school.
Yeah, out of high school.
Did integration factor into your work experience?
No, because what I worked in was a warehouse, and it was owned by a major company, but where it was considered the Hill in St. Louis, which was an entire Italian community. So it didn't play into that.
Um,
Not
your
where I was.
your parents worked in similar but also different fields. How did integration affect their work experience?
When I first was cognizant of Daddy working, it was just a 2-bay garage and the owner. So it was just 3 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't anything really there. Now we went to the Pontiac dealership. There was more races that were there, and it depended on who you were as to how they had one guy that would throw it up that he was black and he could get what he wanted because he was black. And they had other black people working that went to work and went home, and that was what they did. So you had a mixed bag, people that were going to take advantage of the system and people just wanted to get their paycheck. So, yeah, it had their problems just like anybody else.
What about grandma? Was she working then?
Yeah, but she worked at the school in the cafeteria to start with, and then she was supervisor at night janitors. So it was just, it was kind of a revolving door of people coming and going. You didn't really get a chance to really know or have opinions or anything else.
I think my dad, when he worked at the dairy, I can remember saying there were 2 or 3 black employees, but most of them, since it was a union business, they did their job. I mean, as long as they did their job, I don't think anybody had any complaints about it.
So Brown versus Board and integration led into the civil rights movement becoming very predominant in that decade. So how could you tell that life changed? Because you being in the workplace more and you being at school.
I remember basically when it got advanced to those stages that yeah, there was things you didn't do. There was areas you did not go, and that's sorry to say. I mean, at one point, you just let it go.
When I was in school, you had a few people that would try to stir stuff up, and people just ignored them. Um, everybody had their own friends.
Mhm.
It's not different than it is today. Everybody had their own group of friends, and it was never a problem. I don't know if it was because we were rural
Mhm.
or what, but we even had a black guy dating a white girl, and from what I remember, nobody cared. Nobody cared.
Mhm.
We just did our thing and we went on. All we were trying to do was get out of high school.
Mhm. How did events surrounding integration, the civil rights movement, such as the bus boycott and the freedom marches and stuff like that? Now, it was more predominantly southern states, but the sentiments and the feelings were becoming nationwide at that point. So, how did that affect life here? Did it affect life?
I don't think it did.
I don't. Where we lived out here, it didn't affect us.
That's the beauty of living in the country.
I think that where I saw most of it actually was on the news at that time. You would see where it took place in the city, where they had problems with the buses or the marches and stuff like that. But I think right now I look back, I think the reason they didn't actually come out here, this was not easy to get out here at this time. The roads were okay, but they did not have the highway system that they have now.
And they didn't have the metro system.
Right.
There were no trains, there were no bi-state buses to
Mhm.
speak of.
Mhm.
That didn't really start happening until the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a bus back then, it was once, maybe twice a day, and that was it.
Yeah. It's somebody to pick you up
Yeah.
and bring you back, and that was,
Kind of like a school bus route.
yeah, pretty much.
Kind of. There was no call ride or anything like that.
Um, as you moved through the decade, through the 60s, getting closer to 70, were there areas outside of school or work that were positively or negatively affected by the civil rights movement?
Out here?
Yeah, in your life.
I don't think so.
No, I think, by that time I'd have been in Monsanto, and it was at the world headquarters, and there was a large mixture of people.
I was still in high school.
So, I mean, it just really, I don't think it played a part over there. I didn't see it.
Junior high. So we just, again, I think the beauty of living in a rural area and growing up having small classes where everybody knew everybody,
Hmm.
I think it was a benefit.
Hmm. As the civil rights movement grew and we get more towards 1970, Vietnam is going heavily, and then the civil rights movement, and there were uh, assassinations and things that happened throughout the decade. How did those events affect you and your belief system?
I think for me, basically, since it wasn't pertaining basically, I would say to our area, or if that would be the right terminology, but it was the news of these assassinations taking place. That was history that now you look back, you wish you'd never seen it, but it's history in our lifetime. I don't. I know when they had that thing in Alabama with the bus thing, the segregation on the buses or at the college where the governor and they said, no, this ain't happening. I mean, yeah, everybody, was talking about that, but I don't think it was something, a topic of conversation, but it wasn't anything that we really worried about.
I don't think we. I remember thinking about it, hearing about it, and everybody knew it was awful what was happening. But I think because it happened over there or in another state, we were kind of insulated. And again, I think back to the kids I went to school with, LG Huddleston, that I knew since third grade, fourth grade. He moved up here from Mississippi. We went to school together, and we see each other outside of school or years after school, and it was still LG, Norma. It was just, I don't think the country made a bigger issue and certain people made a bigger issue than what it was actually like, at least because I'm 7 years younger than him. I think everybody else was making it a bigger issue than what it was. I mean, should there have been equal rights? Sure. I get that in civil rights. But I think it was done as a disturbance. Thinking of who was in office at the time with Johnson in the 70s, you had Nixon. I think it was more fear mongering.
I think really that, again, in the area we lived, I think we saw it affect bigger cities around us, the east, the west, the south. And it's like a lot of stuff, it takes time to get to the Midwest. And I think in that respect, I think people were able to form a better opinion. And then waking up and being right in the middle of it. We could see what was going on if we wanted to. Sometimes you just, it's not bothering us.
Thank you.